The College Football Playoff Committee sent the message loud and clear. If you're in the ACC, you're not getting any benefit of the doubt.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return because new customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, so Kenton, I'm watching on Tuesday night the CFP reveal, and it was very suspenseful because even though this isn't the last one, this is a pretty decisive one because most teams don't have a game left to play. And, you know, I knew that if Miami was going to have a legit shot to sneak into the CFP, they would have to be no worse than number 11. That's because, you know, every team from the Big 12 is ranked lower, and there's going to be a Big 12 champion. And whenever that champion is crowned this coming weekend, of course, they're going to leapfrog into the top 12. So Miami needed to be number 11, and they come out at number 12 behind Alabama at number 11. And that has been the talk of the nation, Kenton Gibbs, for the last 24 hours. So let's get right into it. And again, listen, I obviously Miami fumbled their opportunity to control their own destiny. I get it, and I'll circle back to that. But at the end of the day, does 9-3 Alabama, in your mind, do they have a better resume than 10-2 Miami? I think you're muted.
Y'all already know where this is going to go based on my first statement. I'm sorry, Grandma Doors. I still love you, but your Tide cannot get in. There is not a world in which here's the thing about these metrics that I cannot stand. Okay. First of all, I'm glad that everybody knows that a hypothetical Alabama beats actual Alabama by about 28 points. I believe that point spread would be about 28.5 because hypothetical Alabama ain't lost a game in quite some time.
Right, exactly. You know? Hypothetical Alabama didn't lose to Oklahoma.
No, they didn't. They surely didn't put up 3 points. And hypothetical Alabama definitely didn't lose to Vanderbilt. Had Diego Pavia in the Heisman race, for Christ's sake. PU. But with that being said, the reality is, to me, if you lose 3 games, that's one thing, sure. If you lose 3 games to a murderer's row, I'm okay with that, right? If your 3 losses, hey, you lose an extremely close one to Georgia, you lose an extremely close one to Texas, you lose an extremely close one to Ole Miss or LSU, I'm okay with that. I promise you, I can look at that and say, you know what? At their best, they're slightly below those two. They're one play away against some of the best teams in the nation. But what I saw was a team that when they're not at their best, they're 3 touchdowns worse than the Oklahoma Sooners. That's what I saw. I saw a team that when not at their best, they are worse than the Vanderbilt Commodores. I beg your damn pardon. I bet that's the team I'm supposed to look at and say, yeah, they've got a ton of good losses. Even if I was to use the good loss metric, the only one that falls in that category is Tennessee. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only one of their losses you can say, that looks like a playoff team and they lost them. That's it. Yeah. Nobody else. So, again, you know, using the current top 25, by the way, what an interesting qualifier of current top 25. Because, again, it works in this cyclical way, which is why I posed the tweet earlier when asked, what's next? What replaces the committee? I said there should be some type of rating that is completely untethered to the coaches and AP poll. There should be some rating that's completely independent because a lot like the year, I can't remember what year it was, but there was a year where the Sun Belt swept the Big 12, including a team that was in the Big 12 championship. Guess what that should have told us about that year? Hey, sorry to tell you, the Sun Belt's the better conference, period. Because the on-the-field results, you can say, oh, Iowa State would have beat Troy 10 times out of 11. This was that one time. Sorry. We live in a world where all 3 of these teams had their one time in the same year. So I look at this and I say to myself, if Alabama gets in, the on-the-field results don't really matter all that much. because, you know, this argument of, oh, just schedule weak and you'll get in. Okay, sure. But the teams that that scheduled so weak, let's look at them for a second, shall we? Do you talk about top 25? If we stretch that out to top 30, did you know that Miami has a better record than Alabama in that regard? Or I'm sorry, the same record as Alabama in that regard? Because then Louisville and Duke would both be in that category. So we're talking about 130 some odd teams in the nation. And if you stretch that rating out from top 25 to top 30, all of a sudden there becomes a different thing there. And then I would ask, what the hell has Missouri done to end up ranked in the top 25? They've gotten their head kicked in every time they played a decent team. So, you know, I look at this and I say to myself, it's a shame. It's a travesty. It's a sham. And again, I know I'm going to get a call about this. I know my grandmother's going to have some not so nice words for me about this.
Sorry, Grandma.
No, you, Granny. We love you. But I'm sorry, your Tide don't belong in the playoff. They belong in a nice bowl game somewhere, just not in one of the New Year's Six, just not in one of the ones that are going to determine a national champion.
Well, a couple things on what you said. Like, it's interesting the point you bring up that if you were to extend it to the top 30, that Miami has the same record. But let me go back to what Ward Emanuel, the CFP chair, who comes off like a used car salesman because he was very manipulative with his words, right? He mentions, hey, Alabama only has one loss against teams that are currently in the top 25, but then hold on, who ranks the top 25? That's you, right? So you're the one, Mr. Emanuel, and your committee members. You guys are the reason why a 9-3 Duke team, who Miami beat, and I believe deserves to be ranked.
Yes.
That should be a team that's in the top 25, and Miami having a win over that team. I mean, you know, some would argue they probably fumbled it when they lost to Stanford, but, you know, Louisville being on the cusp of being ranked, I think that was a good win for Miami, especially on the road. And the other thing that Ward Emanuel really manipulated was one of the points that he made, and you want to talk about not giving full context, all right? Mm-hmm. He was touting how Bama only has one loss to teams with better than 500 records. That was what he said. I mean, that's some real deception. So yeah, they only have one loss against teams with above 500 records, completely ignoring the fact that they have two losses to teams that are 500.
What's that? What? Oh yeah, you know, everybody above 500, they look great. So what you're telling me now is, hey, you can sleepwalk. As much as people talk about this, just schedule easy. Well, if scheduling easy was the way to get it done, wouldn't that be Alabama's Achilles heel this year?
Yeah.
Wouldn't these teams that are just so bad and so terrible, wouldn't that be Alabama's Achilles heel? Because they seem to have lost to two teams that without beating them don't make bowl games. If Diego Pavia and company do not beat Alabama, guess what? The only chance they have at a bowl game is if somebody else drops out because their graduation rate is high. If Oklahoma does not beat Alabama, guess what? They're not making a bowl game. So I think that it's extremely interesting how, again, Alabama gets all this love and all this, oh, well, you know, they'll figure it out. Oh, well, it's not fair to Bama. Yeah, it's fair to Bama to say, hey, you've got big wins, but you've got terrible losses. You have some of the higher highs in the nation. Nobody would disagree with that. But your lows have to matter too. And if you talk about Miami's lows are what? Losing to a team that took Georgia to 8 overtimes? Losing to a 9-win team on the road? Okay.
And they lost those two games, by the way, by a combined 9 points.
Right.
Total 9 points.
Yeah. Yeah. It's foolishness. It really and truly is. And beyond that, lost that by a combined 9 points. Do you think, and again, I know Oklahoma, hypothetically, you know, they would never lose to a lowly ACC team. But when you look at Oklahoma and who they actually were, how do you excuse a 3-touchdown loss as late in the season as that was? What was that, week 12?
Yes, right. It was. No, I think it was. Yeah. I guess it was week 12. And another thing that you bring that up, another one of Ward Manuel's arguments was basically that, you know, Miami finished colder than Alabama because he brought up, well, they lost 2 out of their last 3 games, which is true. Miami did that. Mm-hmm. Whereas Alabama went 2-1 over their last 3 games. But I think context matters here because the one was a 3-touchdown loss to a bad Oklahoma team. And the 2 that they won were against a now 5-7 Auburn team. And I don't even remember if it was home or the road. Does it really even matter? 5-7 Auburn team they beat. And they beat Mercer from the FCS was one of their final 3 wins. Fantastic.
Well, but Donno, that Auburn win has to mean a lot because Auburn would never lose to a lowly ACC team. If Auburn were no, Donno, no, hypothetically, if Auburn were to lose to a lowly ACC team, it would have to be our champion. It'd have to be one of our best, right? It'd have to be like it wouldn't be some newcomer that can't win here like Cal. It couldn't be. It couldn't be a Cal team that was early in the season without their all-world running back that we thought was going to be the guy to carry the mail. It couldn't be that situation. Hold on, wait, what's that? Oh, I just got news. That was the exact situation. Again, hypothetical Auburn wins that game 10 times out of 10. But when you put them on the field against folks, all of a sudden they don't. Hypothetical Bama blows everybody out. There's nobody in the ACC has a chance against hypothetical Bama until you tell Jalen Milroe complete a hitch pass for me, buddy. Tell me, can you do that? Can you do a little something along those lines? Hey, Malachi Moore, maybe don't melt down at the end of a football game. Maybe, take a loss and walk off the field like a normal person. When you get to asking people that, all of a sudden the ball game changes. So, I look at this situation and I simply say, I'm tired of the manipulation, the trickeration, I got to distort my words and current top 25. Well, who ranks the top 25? Well, we do. Well, we got to decide who were the top 25 teams, and we decided based on what we decided. Based on what? Who the hell has Missouri beat all year? Their combined score against ranked teams this year, I believe they're negative. They're 0-3 with negative 30 or so, maybe even more than that. So,
more than that, I think.
What are we doing here? Why are they ranked? Again, they're ranked to help out all of these SEC teams because now you can say Alabama has beaten a ranked Missouri. Yeah. And I love Coach Drake. Anybody who knows me knows there is not a single head coach who is not a coach of your school that is beloved more by Kenton Gibbs than Eli Drinkwitz. There is not.
He's standing on business.
I love me some. Hey, you better tell him. Right? We stand on business, Josh. I love me some Coach Drake, but that's not a good team this year. So, I look at this situation and I just say it's really a sham. It's really an embarrassment. And again, at what point do the games mean something? At what point do we start to say, okay, we get it. We know that you think you're the best. We know that, hey, you've won games over other conferences and all that good stuff, but you've lost some too. The teams that have dominated your conference lost to USC. That's a thing that happened.
Right.
So, at some point in time, we've got to live in reality and stop living in these hypotheticals where, well, what would Vegas handicap it at? What would Vegas handicap? If Vegas was always right, there would be no such point in gambling because whoever Vegas picks, that's just who's going to win. And yet and still, degenerates like Donno find themselves on FanDuel every single weekend.
And I find plenty of ways to lose, by the way, even betting favorites. I still find the favorites don't always win. I learned that the hard way. But I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on when we come back. We do have the ACC Player of the Year has been announced, and we'll also take a look at how ACC teams have finished in recruiting. You guys want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We are not done yet. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Better Together is back here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You guys, it's that time of year. Maybe the team that you drafted for your season-long fantasy leagues are not getting it done for you. You want to stay in that action. Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs. And you can play with your friends, guys, not against them. You pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social fantasy movement at Better Together. Guys, I love playing. I started this last year. I'm going to continue this year. It provides me with a sense of camaraderie. It enhances the social experience of watching sports. It makes you realize that Yeah, daily fantasy is fun alone, but like a lot of other things, it's better with your friends. Download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using our promo code Locked On for a free $10 entry into any NCAA football or NFL contest. Play with us in the Locked On CFB Saturday Games contest this Saturday. Remember the code Locked On, because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes alongside Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. So another thing that Ward Manuel said last night on ESPN that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me was, that the teams that don't play this weekend, which is most of them, right? Because only 8 teams, 10 if you include group of 5 plus, playing conference championship games, that their data points cannot change. Right. Essentially, he's implying that Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina are locked into where they're at, which would mean, Miami can't pass Alabama, South Carolina can't pass anybody. But that explanation doesn't pass the smell test to me, because, okay, just because these teams aren't playing this weekend doesn't mean their strength of record cannot improve this weekend, Kenton. Because an example, and even though this example doesn't favor the ACC, I think it's still worth pointing this out. So you're telling me South Carolina, who's ranked number 14, that their data point cannot improve if Clemson wins the ACC championship this weekend. They just beat Clemson in the last weekend of the season. So you're telling me if suddenly they've got a victory over a conference champion, that can't improve their data point? Like, that's one of those things that doesn't make sense to me. The common opponent thing, this idea that everybody who doesn't play is locked in to the spot that they're in. I don't know if he misspoke, or to me, it doesn't pass the smell test.
Oh, it shouldn't pass the smell test, especially when juxtaposed against something else that he said in a later press conference that was not televised, in terms of the I believe it was some press conference or something along those lines held afterwards, some press junket, when asked could SMU be knocked out of the playoff by losing, the answer was, it's possible.
That's
now
crazy.
Here's the thing. It's not even about SMU. The question is this. If you are saying that the plot points or the points of these teams, like where they are, cannot move in terms of the teams that are not playing, if you're saying that theirs can't move, why are you penalizing a team that plays? Why?
Right.
And that's where everybody keeps coming up with all this. Well, maybe it's better to say your team just came down with COVID or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, what type of soft crap is this? This is unlike anything I've ever seen in my life, because everything that I was raised up in, everything that I was taught about, people talk about millennials being the participation trophy generation. Not in the Gibbs household. We threw away every participation trophy. If you didn't win MVP, most improved, defensive player, offensive player, best setter, whatever, you didn't win one of those awards, it was going in the trash, because we were taught you always compete. You never turn down the opportunity to compete. You just don't do it. So now we're putting teams in a position where we're incentivizing not competing. And we're not even talking about scheduling easy. We're talking about for your damn championship of your conference. We're talking about filling up your hardware. We're talking about filling up your championship trophy case with some hardware. And teams are saying, well, maybe it makes more sense for us. And you created this situation, Ward. You created it with your double speak, well, it's possible. How? How would it be possible? Whatever happens, guess what? Even if SMU were to lose 24-3 to Clemson, guess what? They still wouldn't have a worse loss than your precious Alabama Crimson Tide.
Right.
It would be the exact same losses them to a better team.
Yeah.
And this ain't just about SMU. This is about all of these teams. Put it on, Donno. Put the 10-point hat on.
Okay, because here's something. I want to throw this at you, Kenton, and I want to make sure I'm wearing this.
Okay.
So that people don't take me too seriously, but I'm not completely unserious when I say this, because guess what? The committee leaves themselves open to this sort of a concern. All right. So here is a conspiracy theory that I think we have to consider. All right.
We doing the knowledge on Locked On ACC. We doing the knowledge right now. Go ahead.
Doing the knowledge. So this is not only obviously we all know there's an SEC bias, but I think even more clearly there's an Alabama bias when it comes to that brand. But in terms of the SEC bias thing, Kenton, this keeps running through my brain since last night. All right. We know that the SEC and the Big Ten, which are, known as the Power Two, they've set up their alliance, they've held meetings, and we know for a fact that they have used the leverage with the College Football Playoff Committee to try and, lobby for more spots in the next format and more preferential treatment. It just means more, all that. Like, we know for a fact that the SEC and the Big Ten have used the idea as leverage of, well, hey, you guys need us a lot more than we need you. And if you don't give us the most favorable possible treatment, we can just leave and do our own playoff. We don't need the ACC and the Big 12 the way they need us or the way the College Football Playoff needs us. And so I can't help but wonder if the committee opens themselves up to the possibility of giving more preferential treatment to an SEC power or a Big Ten power because they don't want to piss those guys off.
I may need a tinfoil hat as well here because I got a hot conspiracy that's not really a conspiracy, but it's even hotter than that one. I think that what's happening right now is about ratings draws. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Miami plays a fun brand of football, but Miami, as they exist right now, are not the same ratings draw that Bama is. They're just not.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. They're not that same draw. Miami is a city that has multiple professional teams, actual professional teams. Where the hell are the professional teams in Alabama? Oh, I'll tell you, they're in Tuscaloosa. That's the professional team. That's it. That's all. Who's their baseball team, Donno? Basketball?
They might have a couple minor league teams.
Basketball? What you got? You got anything for me? Oh, they gotta have an MLS team, right? There's a Birmingham FC floating around somewhere, right?
No.
Okay. So that is their draw. They're going to be a bigger draw, but just say that. To me, I would respect somebody who would just say out loud, this is the grift. This is what it is. Fight me. Guess what? Yeah, because then you lose legitimacy, but you've already lost legitimacy. You've already lost legitimacy as a committee. And like I said before, if the Big Ten and the SEC want to take their ball and go home, let them. Tell them, if I'm the group of five and the ACC and the Big 12, I am demanding, not requesting, demanding that we go back to the computers determining it and take it a step further than the BCS even did, because the AP and the coaches poll should have nothing to do with it. It should be based on what you have done on the field. What has your conference done on the field? We should take Troy football with the same ratings that NC State football is met with the same ratings that Texas is met with the same ratings that Michigan is met with, if they do the same things. To me, and if you force their hand, if all of these teams come together and say, hey, we're forcing your hand, we are not doing anything that's tethered to the AP and coaches anymore, because we don't give a damn who's on TV. We don't give a damn who's on ABC and ESPN1. I want to talk some ball. I want to talk who's won the games when we've played each other. That's what I want to talk. And when you do that, that is when I believe you will force the SEC and Big Ten into a corner where it's like, if they take their ball and go home, they are de facto admitting in a true meritocracy, we do not hold up to what we're currently doing. We are holding up in this range because it's that brand bias, because it's that conference bias. But when you go meritocracy, what you earn, you eat what you kill, and you only get what you show up and earn, you've got to win in that. If they decide to leave, you've won. You've won, because people may say your championship ain't legit. And all you got to say is, we invited them. They're invited whenever they want to come. But they decided that it was more important to hold on to what the media thinks of them than what an objective computer that doesn't know any of our teams from Joe Schmo down the street decides should happen here.
We got an ACC, well, two of them, offense and defense players of the year crowned, and we'll take a look on this early National Signing Day, how the ACC recruiting classes are looking. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. We've been having a blast all season long with FanDuel, and there's so much more football left. Guys, get ready to tackle all the NFL action, all the college football action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So this dropped earlier today, Kenton. Miami quarterback Cam Ward, who ends up eclipsing 4,000 passing yards, 36 touchdown passes. He's been named ACC Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. Well, actually, he's been named both overall ACC Player of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year, while Boston College defensive end Donovan Ezraku was named ACC Defensive Player of the Year. So those came out today. No surprise on either side, right? Is there any? I mean, I guess like offensively, the only other guy that probably really had a chance was Kyle McCord. I know he did win head-to-head, but Cam Ward had the most impressive season there, and Ezraku was, again, a monster on defense that not enough people are talking about.
Oh, absolutely. Donovan Ezraku has been the anchor that has held Boston College in place this season. He is akin to what Castellanos was last season for them. He's been that just on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, every time you look up, that young man is in somebody's backfield making a big play on their quarterback.
16 and a half sacks this
16
year.
and a half. 16 and a half. That's no joke. That's no joke there. And here's the other thing about it that I really think people need to pay attention to and really give credence to when you're talking about Donovan Ezraku. We talk about guys who put up big numbers a lot, but there are moments where those guys, they do one game of 4 to 5 sacks against nobody'sville Tech, and then they disappear. And then they go nowhere for the next 3-4 games, and then you see them again when they play another scrub team. Here's a very interesting fact about Donovan Ezraku. Once ever during this season did he go 2 weeks without a sack. And even in that one time where he went 2 weeks without a sack, he forced a fumble against Virginia Tech. So that tells you the type of situation that we're looking at with this young man. He showed up consistently. He was there all the time for this team. And like I said, do you think they beat Michigan State without him?
No.
I don't think so. Do you think they beat Florida State without him? Even knowing what we know now, yeah. I don't think so. I think he was the first person that had people looking at the offensive line like, are they okay? Are them boys good? Because he wrecked their game plan. So Donovan is who he is. And Cam, I mean, how much do we really have to say about him? Like, what can you say about him besides he belongs in the Heisman conversation? He should be in New York. He absolutely should be in New York because he was walking plot armor for how long for this team?
Oh, yeah. Well, he wasn't he didn't put up that good numbers in the loss to Georgia Tech, but even in the loss to Syracuse, we can agree that had nothing to do with Cam Ward. He actually had his highest Pro Football Focus grade of the year in the Syracuse game. That was on the defense, and that was on, a fumble that he had nothing to do with.
Exactly. The only thing that you could maybe say, oh, he did wrong. He should have made a tackle on the fumble. But yeah, when you're blaming
he almost did, by the way. He almost stopped that touchdown.
Exactly. When you're blaming a quarterback for not making a tackle on a play where he didn't turn the ball over, guess what? He had a pretty damn good game. Okay. Yeah, so, Cam Ward, he's been phenomenal all year. He has been the golden standard. He's one of the few quarterbacks ever in terms, or let me not even say ever. Actually, yeah, we can say ever. One of the few quarterbacks ever to be a one-year rental that showed up and was not very good. He's been great from go. He has been phenomenal from go. So, you got to love what he's doing.
So before the show, Kenton made me feel kind of rude, but also made me feel a lot better because a lot of Miami fans are disappointed with the way their class of 2025 is panning out, because they lost a couple recruits in recent days. 5-star safety Hilton Drake Stubbs flipped to Florida. Gavin Nix, a 4-star linebacker, flipped to Oregon, and Miami didn't land some of the flips they were trying to land on National Signing Day. And I'm complaining to Ken. I'm not really complaining. I'm just saying, like, there's some disappointment, because I still think it's a really good class, but just the vibes in Miami are not all that positive about it right now. And then Kenton starts laughing at me because I'm complaining about the 15th rated recruiting class in the country. How's NC State doing on the trail?
Hey, we don't have to talk about that. We don't. What are we? I thought that we were going to be good and amicable guys today, Donno. I thought we were going to be good and amicable. But since we want to take it there, NC State is currently 9th in the ACC in terms of recruiting classes. And in the nation overall, they are a healthy 41. So, Donno is over there tripping about his 15th ranked class. And, there's so much disappointment. Well, you know what, though? You know what makes me the happiest, Donno? You know what just brings joy to my heart? What makes me smile? What makes me, like Denzel said in Fences when he was talking about his mistress, I could laugh until my bones ache, but I ain't leaving it. You know what gives me that type of joy?
What gives
Do you know who's dead last in the ACC? The teams surrounding this team in recruiting are Troy, Bowling Green, Nevada, all above them. Then it's them. Then below them, shout out to the Eastern Michigan Eagles up there in Ypsilanti, Buffalo, and App State. Do you know who that is?
With the way you're grinning, there can only be one answer to this. With the way Kenton is smiling, I'm gonna guess it's the Dirty Foot Club.
Oh, you know it! Yeah, when you're down there with a group of 5 team that doesn't have a head coach in App State. Oh, what a time. I just feel so sad for them, Donno.
They only have 9 commits. I know they don't have a coach right now, but they only have 9 signees now, which is like most schools have in the 20s for incoming recruits.
Well, App State not only doesn't have a coach, but they're a group of 5 team and they have 11 commits. So, I know it's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. It makes me so sad, But if I was a recruit and I saw a bunch of guys lose a game and get beat up afterwards too, I too would say, I'm not sure if I want anything to do with that. I don't like getting jumped on. I don't like getting my head whooped on. I'll pass, actually.
Yeah, so just the way teams finished in recruiting in the ACC, Miami does have the top class in the ACC, 21 commits, 15 4-stars, an average grade of 90.78, which is that's the 24/7 ranking. I'm actually surprised Georgia Tech has they got more commits. They got more commits than most of the teams, but Georgia Tech has the second best class, Clemson third, and Florida State. They finished 4th in the ACC. I think 25th in the 27th, 25th in the country, something like that. It's not nearly as bad as it could have been for them.
Not nearly, and I'm actually confused by their success a little bit because if I saw a team do that, I'm not sure I'd want anything to do with that program because but I guess that's 29-year-old speaking.
Well, also, but it also like they can send the message of there's a lot of open jobs here. Like you come in and you could maybe play your first year, although that's probably not going to happen because they're going to bring in 30 portal players more than likely. But they can tell recruits, we got a lot of jobs open here.
And I get that, but do you want to take a job in that type of culture? And again, 18-year-olds aren't smart enough to process that. Like that's okay. That's okay because 18-year-old me wasn't smart enough to understand certain things either. That 29-year-old me looks at it and is like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But that's how that works. But I'll tell you. If I saw the writing on the wall for a coach like that, you know what I mean? And even if you look at Florida's situation where you're like, oh, Billy saved his job, for how long? For how long? Okay.
Here's what happened in Florida, and I'm not knocking it because I embrace the NIL era. I understand that this is the landscape, and if you can do this, good for you. So part of Florida's success, now the stability under Napier doesn't hurt, and also shout out to DJ Lagway because players are excited to play with him. So DJ Lagway, their quarterback, is a big part of Florida's recruiting success. But so what happened with Florida was, remember up until about a month ago, they were going to fire Billy Napier. But then they decided, because they had already raised Kenton a bunch of money for Napier's buyout, when they decided not to fire him, where do you think they funneled that money? So, and listen, power to you. I mean, I'm not to say Miami hasn't spent big on players and Florida State and so on. I'm not knocking it. That's just the game. And that's a big part of the reason why Florida ended up really sticking the landing in this class.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, again, I look at this and I just say to myself, hey, every recruit is motivated by different things. I personally, being a part of, like, I can understand building towards winning, but a complete collapse like what we saw, I don't know. Hey, I get it though. They have a very storied history, and they're never too far away from a championship. I'll say that much. They've never been that far away, that far removed. Even in this terrible season, they're 1 year away from being undefeated ACC champs. So, I get it. I understand it from a certain aspect, but from other aspects, I'm just like, ooh, that looks like a nasty situation. That looks like some nasty business there that they got going on.
Well, we appreciate everyone for taking the time to check out Locked On ACC. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio version, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Make sure to check out our other shows. Kenton hosts Locked On Wolfpack. I host Locked On Canes, and we'll talk to everybody tomorrow on another episode of Locked On ACC. We're getting the squad together tomorrow right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Complaining about the 15th best class.